week ago, a few weeks
Right.
ago. And I mean, what was your reaction? You had been incorporated in the reporting, so obviously you knew that this
Right.
was coming out.
Sure. We knew, the initial FOIA response or request had been made late in 2020, and it was considered and covered a pretty significant time frame of 5 years. So first we gathered those relevant records and then went through the normal process of examining those and redacting, information that is not allowed to be public. And then eventually that package was sent out. And then we did actually have some excellent dialogue with those entities, always through writing and email. They would submit written questions. I would provide as in-depth an answer as I could. And I think we certainly wanted accuracy to be a key of this information that was going out.
The papers, BDN, Portland Press Herald, and their reporting, they're investigating the Maine State Police Department's concealing officer wrongdoing, they call it. They call it a culture of silence. Officer misdeeds are kept secret. You say in your response today that that's not the case. This is a matter of law. So could you elaborate further on that?
Sure. I think, we know that our people, although we believe they are the very best, can make mistakes, and we hold our people accountable when that happens. But there are very specific guidelines and rules related to what information is public, related to our discipline and our enforcement of policies and procedures, things like that. And so, a limited release is not really a discretionary call. We believe that our response and the records we provided were in full compliance with the laws as they exist.
Full compliance with the laws, but do you think that the department could be perhaps more transparent about these wrongdoings, instances of wrongdoing?
I think if the law allowed, it would benefit everybody to have broader transparency and accountability really in all public sector positions and positions of public trust.
There were instances that the papers referenced of other departments interpreting the same set of laws differently. The Cumberland County Sheriff's Department specifically providing more details in their cases of officer wrongdoing. So is it a different interpretation of the law? Why can other departments be more transparent?
Yeah, and that's kind of a question probably for our legal teams, right? When we present the request and present our records that are relevant to that request, it really is our staff attorney and attorneys from the Bureau of Human Resources that determine the exact content of our response.
Could you walk me through, what happens from a report of of officer wrongdoing through what becomes public?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of times we may have a citizen call with a concern. It could be something as simple as they disagree with the enforcement action that the trooper took. They received a ticket for failing to stop at a stop sign, and they felt they stopped. We simply would refer them to the normal court process. They may say, hey, a trooper stopped me today and his mask kept falling down on his face. That type of thing, we're going to deal direct with the supervisor and directly with the trooper. That's not really going to result in a record of discipline because it doesn't rise to that. Now, when we have cases that allege misconduct, and again, an important thing is an allegation is not evidence, right? We have to take a look at the allegation, the facts that are presented initially, the allegation made, and then, by the contract, we put the member under notice so they understand they're under investigation. Then we look at, the complainant, any witnesses, any evidence that they have. Again, we'd look at any videotape or anything like that related to our officer's interaction with that person. We interview that member, any other aspects of it. And then based on that totality of the circumstances and the evidence and information that we're able to confirm, then we take a look at, all right, what policies, procedures were violated? Is it a law violation? Is it something that we need to bring the Attorney General's on board about and seek their guidance? And really, what is the potential outcome of this as discipline? Then eventually we are going to propose discipline. That proposed discipline is presented to the member through the Troopers Association. There's an automatic mitigating process in this that's called a Loudermill hearing, where it's an attempt for them to be able to try and mitigate that initial discipline. And then eventually we find out and end up with that final letter of final discipline, and that's the final decision. And that decision is really the only part of that process, other than the initial notice of investigation, that final finding of discipline is what Maine law allows us to share. So a lot of the information that's contained in that body of the investigation right now is not public.
So when it is confirmed misconduct and you have that public record, who writes that record?
Generally, it would be written either by our lieutenant, who's in charge of the Office of Professional Standards, or the lieutenant colonel. And actually, that final discipline is actually always signed by the lieutenant colonel.
Okay, so it's up to them how transparent essentially they are in relaying the specifics of an instance of misconduct?
No, it's not really a discretionary call. This was the allegation, and this is the discipline, and that's basically what is allowed to become public. Getting extra details or getting into the narrative about the investigative process is not allowed in our interpretation of the law for that final discipline. It's pretty short. This was the finding. This is the action that you're alleged to have done, and this is the discipline that is recommended and being proposed.
You do say it is your interpretation of the law. Is this something that you're exploring in the sense of, can we perhaps be more transparent? Because in your statement today, you do say accountability is the cornerstone of public trust. So are you trying to find ways to increase transparency?
I think we're always looking for ways to improve and evaluate ourselves. But I think in this case, it's clearly law that we don't have the discretion to come up with our own interpretation of the law independent of what our counsel is telling us we can release. I certainly think everyone benefits from increased transparency and accountability, especially from public sector employees and people that are in a position of public trust. And certainly, I mentioned in my statement today, we absolutely would come alongside with the legislature and work to inform and educate them on our perspective of the benefits of increased transparency and accountability. We would always be concerned about protecting the identity of any potential victim or the identity of a complainant in certain cases, so that we could prevent any type of injury or embarrassment for them. But I think there certainly are ways that we would come alongside and work towards. If there's that desire for increased transparency, we'd be all about that.
You are on board with perhaps adjusting these laws to increase transparency. Why is it important that a police department is transparent?
Well, like I said, I think in many cases it would actually have benefited us to be able to provide more detail. As I explained to the reporters when they provided some of the summaries they had, I informed them they were not factually accurate summaries. And I would have loved to have been able to sit and clarify where those facts as they were presenting them were wrong, and I didn't have the leeway to do that. The law does not allow me to do that.
Your hands are tied.
Yeah, in many ways, yeah.
We've touched on the importance of transparency. Again, in your statement released today, that was how you finished it. Was accountability is the cornerstone of public trust. I mean, every day we ask the public to trust our law enforcement officers to make sure that they are upholding the law. I mean, can we expect that trust to be maintained when there isn't at this point, because of these laws, that full transparency when there is confirmed officer misconduct?
I think absolutely that our people, like I said, I believe we hire the very best people and then train them and certainly set a tone of high standards of morals and ethics and integrity and excellence. And I believe our people deserve 100% of the public's trust. Very proud of our people, the work they do and who they are, not just as troopers, but as individuals and members of their communities. And we're one of the few agencies that I'm aware of that holds our people accountable both on duty and off duty. We recognize that our troopers represent themselves as troopers and our agency 24/7. And I know that accountability is a huge part of it, and that has been our model of operation for many years. Regardless of whether people are interested in the fine details or not, we know that our agency has a legacy and that it's known for integrity and excellence and a higher level of service, and we are not going to be the generation that messes that up.
That's this idea that your troopers, they're on the clock, not on the clock per se, but they're embodying the values of this department 24/7. And in the more personal case that was shared in the 3rd Portland Press Herald BDN article, where we heard from the wife of Justin J. Cooley, that was obviously not a case relevant to his performance on duty, but rather off duty. I mean, what was your takeaway of how that case was handled? Could it have been handled better?
You know, I'm absolutely proud of Lieutenant Tilsey and Sergeant Hansen and the work that they did to support that member and that family to a point where they realized that it kind of crossed the line, and then they immediately took appropriate steps to ensure that a law enforcement agency, not ours, was informed either by the complainant or by us was the way it was going to happen. And one thing that I did explain is that when there's a companion criminal case against one of our members, we would make sure that we put any internal efforts on hold so that we don't interfere or compromise that criminal investigation. So I think our members did an outstanding job of providing the support and resources that that member needed as we tried to come alongside that family and assist them. But once we realized that it had gone to a certain level, we absolutely knew that law enforcement intervention was needed, and we ensured that happened.
So you say it was instant response. Is the article incorrect in saying that it was days before the department took action?
Yes, yeah, that is not correct. It was as soon as our members knew that this information came that rose to a certain level of conduct that could be criminal, everything that we had to do informally to try and support that member and their family then was directed to another law enforcement agency immediately.
Okay. So you say that where the papers call it a culture of silence here, you say that that is not true. How would you define the culture of the Maine State Police Department around misconduct?
I think every member has a clear understanding of what they represent, and that what they represent is much larger than themselves. I know that they have a standard that they are held to and that they hold each other to, and that they would not hesitate to bring forward misconduct of another member. They recognize we're held to a higher standard, and we should be. We absolutely accept that higher level of scrutiny when you take the oath of a Maine trooper, and none of them take that lightly. And they hold and cherish the public trust that comes with the position of being a Maine trooper.
So what happens next? Going forward, I mean, what are the next steps the department is taking?
Yeah, I think for us, it's continuing in a pattern of holding our people accountable, kind of segregating whether it's a mistake or an intentional act, always looking at the totality of the circumstances. I know in the stories they pushed for a predetermined discipline matrix, and we don't believe that that's the best solution at all. We believe it's much more fair and equitable and consistent to look at the totality of the circumstances, because these cases can manifest themselves so many ways that we believe this one-size-fits-all approach to discipline is really not at all just or equal or appropriate.
Any other thoughts?
No, and I know probably it would be too long an explanation to make it on tape, but I can say I've used the example of a discipline matrix and the difference of the process that we use. So here we go, and I'll use this as an example. We receive a call from a district attorney that one of our troopers failed to serve a subpoena on a very important case, and as a result, that case was dismissed. So, using our process, we would put that trooper under investigation for failing to serve a subpoena. During the information and investigation of Trooper A, we find out that Trooper A received over 20 subpoenas from the district attorney's office that day, including subpoenas that were not their cases. And it was only after that they were notified by the DA that they checked their vehicle and they realized one of those subpoenas slipped down between their center console and their seat. And they didn't realize it was there and failed to serve it. simply by accident. Now, Trooper B is a case where it is their case, and this witness is at a remote area like Lubec, one area way in and way out, and that trooper makes the conscious decision, I'm not driving all the way to Lubec. The hell, you know, they should have mailed this to him. Now, in a discipline matrix, you know, officer fails to serve a subpoena, this is the penalty. Explain to me how that process would be fair and equitable and really serve to address conduct and behavior, integrity and ethics, right? If there's no way to delineate that type of difference, then how is this pre-printed matrix? You did this, it's this, end of story. So that's, you know, and I realize that's probably a long explanation that you won't be able to share, but that's the type of questions and situations we deal with every day. You know, did this member, you know, due to being busy in the heat of the moment, make a bad decision? Or knowing better, did they consciously choose to make a bad decision? Those are things that need to come into play when you're going to decide what discipline is this person facing.
One is prioritizing intention.
Right. Yeah. One is, you know, mistake of the heart, mistake of the mind, whatever you want to call it. You know, an idea of, man, I didn't realize. I had 22 subpoenas. They were for, you know, some of these were cases that aren't even mine. I didn't know I had a subpoena for that person versus this is my case and my subpoena, not doing it. You know, that's the danger of a matrix, and that's why, you know, and I will say there are times without complete information, how can people determine whether discipline was appropriate or not? And some of the experts that were giving their opinion from wherever that our discipline was light, how can you be an expert and offer your opinion when you only have half the story, less than half the story, and half the story you have is not accurate? So those are things that just became points of contention for me that I felt needed to be explained in you know, a more appropriate context through my statement today.